Hi, this is Roger in Finland, and today we're gonna recreate in miniature some Blade Runner looks. I have created a couple of videos, one recreating scenes from Lucifer and another one recreating a scene from the Stranger Things series. Actually it was from a video from Aputure that they were doing that arcade look, so I went for that one. And then in Facebook I got challenged to do the Blade Runner look, and I said yes. And then I realized that it's Blade Runner. The DP is Roger Deakins. There's no way that anyone in the industry would get close to what he's doing. So how am I gonna do it in miniature? Well, I'm gonna try anyway. So what I did was a little bit similar to what I did with the Stranger Things. So I got inspiration from another video, and this time it's from Film Riot. They did the Blade Runner look, especially that orange look. You can find the link in the notes, and actually I encourage you to go and watch that one, because what I've done is try to get the Blade Runner look that the Film Riot is trying to get. I promise you that that made sense. Second look is a very different look. So this one is a lot cooler, a lot bluer, and this is just a static shot from Joy, played by Ana de Armas. And here I might add a little bit of something on the shot to make it look a little bit more dynamic, but this is the shot that we're going to be trying to reproduce. So let's get to it. First I'm going to show how did I actually shot them and light them. And here the shot from Joy, or Elsa, or Anna. It's Elsa playing Joy, and Anna is Joy, and Anna is Elsa's sister. Anyway, so that shot is maybe a little bit closer to the previous two ones. So this is a miniature set with the small lights. I'm using the MX from Aputure to light it. And the second shot from the when I try to mimic the Film Riot look, that one is a bit more complex. So I'm gonna be using a one big 120D to act as the sun, basically as the only source of light. Everything else is ambient lighting, but that shot is going to have a lot more post-processing and compositing as well. So first I'm going to show how did I shoot them. So this is one of the shots that we're going to try to replicate, and here we have Ana de Armas playing Joy, and she's under the rain. She's very well lit. If you can see, the skin tones actually are fairly skin-like, unlike the blue background. So here we'll need to be careful, especially in the color grading phase, I would say, to keep the skin looking like skin and the background and the rest of the shot looking a little bit cooler and bluer. So here, the side of the face which is not facing the camera is more lit than the other one. She's almost having a split light, even though the second part of her face is still being lit. And then she has the second really strong hair light on the opposite side, which is lighting her hair and her back as well. And another place where you can see that she's being lit by two lights, at the very least, it's her arms. So there's a clear shadow in the middle, but then the front part of her arms is being lit by a softer light, and the part in the back of the arm is being lit by a harsher light. So we're going to try to reproduce this using two lights, and let's see what do we do with the background. So this is the setup I have, and for the background I have a picture from a skyline, and which is already a bit blurred and which is already a bit blue. So that's what we're going to be using. I'm using an anti-filter in here because otherwise there's a little bit too much light coming into the camera with the two MXs. But what we'll have is one MX on the side, so on the left side of the image. I'm giving the light on the front part of the arm and on the lit part of her face. And here the tricky part is how to make it so that it doesn't cast too hard shadows on the other side of the face, because I'm not using any diffuser, which I probably should have used. And on the other side we're going to have another MX, and this one is played really aiming directly into the light. And even if I said that we're going to use two lights, I used the third one, an Aputure, this is an M9, to use it as a fill to give that properly lit second part of the face, which has less light, but is still very well lit. And this is how the final result looks like. In the original Film Riot video, and you can find the link in the notes, there's a sequence of 4 shots. There's the pretty grass shot, then there's a close-up of the talent, the one that he walks away from the camera, and then the drone shot. And the drone shot is the one which is most difficult to replicate. So that's the one I'm gonna start from. And one characteristic of that shot is the really harsh shadow behind the talent, and for them it was the sun, so I needed to bring up the sun. And my way of bringing up the sun was come and take the 120D. If I would have mounted it in a normal light stand, it would have been way too high, so I mounted it on a small tripod, which is actually the three-legged piece of a monopod, and that's going to be the sun. So then when we turn on that light, what we have is the background, which is this brown sheet of paper, very well lit, so that I have room to do whatever I want with it afterwards, and then the hard shadow. And then I'm shooting with a GH5 and a small field wall monitor, and I'm shooting in Vlog, and I have a Vlog for exposure purposes in the camera, and then I'm looking through a LUT in the monitor. And I'm here because I'm handhelding this shot, and I'm not really good at doing that, and they're doing a really precise up and down drone shot. I did the same movement a few times, from both directions, from up to down, from down to up, in case I need to reverse it in post, but in the end I chose one of the last takes. Some of them were a bit shaky, and at the beginning I was a little bit too far away from my statues, our Paw Patrol statues, but this is how I try to replicate that shot. And this is the one that will take the most work in post, since I'm gonna have to add background, maybe probably some foreground as well, and I'm afraid that I'm gonna have to do some rotoscoping, which I hate doing, but it's part of the work. The second shot I'm shooting is the close-up of the talent, and once again I have my 100D sun shining here, but it's giving me a way too harsh light, especially since this little toy has a very reflective surface, so I decided to put a diffuser here. I know it does not tell much about consistency, but the final result will look better and actually more consistent when we have the final shot. Here the challenge was focus, since I wanted the guy to come walking from out of focus into focus. Then I need to make the guy walk without my hand being part of the shot. So yes, I'm holding hands with a small plastic toy to make that shot. So this is the kind of stuff that I do for you guys, and for fun, let's be honest. And I think that I managed to do it. The small little wristband that I have there, it's just a marker to know where will the focus be. And I'm not using a macro lens, so this is just the Olympus 12-40. I did put it in manual focus, but it has a surprisingly close focus distance, so in this case it acts almost as a macro, which was great. So now I'm going the final shot, which is when the guy is walking towards the statues with the back on the camera. And now I'm gonna put this piece into the 120D, basically to block the light from going to the statues, since I want them to be not lit at all, and they should have a uniform illumination, which comes from the ambient light in this case. And here you can see one of the very many mistakes I've made in this process, and it's consistency. So the light should be shining from the other side of the statues. So it came in the original shot from behind the Red Dog or Marshall or Sampa here in Finland, and now it should have been on the other side. I did revert the talent and the statues, but not the sun. Then the next massive challenge I had here was how to make this guy walk. So the final result, how I did it, it's using a pincho, a skewer, one of the sticks that I usually put meat on and goes into the barbecue. So this is going into an uncomfortable place for the poor guy, but it helps me to make him walk. And this is how I got that shot. Sorry, dude. And then we're gonna get into how did I composite the shots using Fusion within Davinci Resolve. Go. Now let's take a look at the shot of Joy, which was taken from a still. I'm not sure if it was a poster actually, but what I wanted here is to add the rain to the shot to make it a little bit more dynamic, since everything else is very static. And to add the rain, I'm gonna use some particles within Fusion. I'm going to use actually 3D particles, and then I'm going to render those into a 2D flat image to put on top of our shot. So here we have our emitter and then the render. In the Fusion particle system, there's always a P emitter and then a P render, and then you can have a lot more things. And what I added was a flat rectangle as the source of the rain. And then what I wanted is that it comes a little bit sideways, so it's a little bit more interesting as well. What I did was use lines as the type of particle that is being shown. And then you can see here, this is the number of particles which is created per second, and that's the variance of how many particles, so it might be between 5 and 11. Then there's the velocity, and that's the angle. So that angle determines that it comes a little bit sideways, the rain, and having some variance, it makes it look a little bit more organic as well. So a bit more interesting maybe. Then in this merge node, I added a couple of lights, one directional light to have a bit more interesting look, since the light will lit some of the drops from some place, then some ambient light to have some constant lighting for the rest of the drops. And here then I added the camera, and the camera is the one that is being used to render the image in 2D that then I can superimpose into our image. And then these two lights, they have a little bit of blue cast because it's rain and everything else is pretty bluish in this image. And then this merge 3D then is piped into a renderer 3D, and that's what will generate the 2D image. So this is the camera view from our merge node, but as you can see, everything is sharp, everything looks in focus, which is not very natural, as we have our character in the foreground, and then the background is an image which is a little bit blurred. But if you enable the accumulation effects, then you can turn on the depth of field. And if you turn on the depth of field, then you have that, exactly, depth of field, which means that you can have some things in focus and some things out of focus. As you can see here, this is way too sharp. This wouldn't look good at all. But if I enable then these accumulation effects, then I'm going to have this depth of field, and some of the drops will look a little bit out of focus, which will make them look which are a bit farther away, which they are, since it was an actual 3D plane, 3D space, sorry, where we're creating the rain. And then in the camera, we can change what is our focal plane, which is which part in the 3D space will be actually in focus, and then everything which is behind or in front, it's out of focus. And depending on the aperture and how you set the render, then it will be in different scale how much out of focus things are. But then we have our rain, and now it looks pretty good. The drops, some of them are in focus, some of them are not. They're coming a little bit randomly, but in the same direction, which makes it look quite natural and organic. And now let's take a look at our color grade. So I'm adding this cinematic, big quotations marks, stripes in there to have the look in 235. But here is our look. So I'm gonna, oh wait, sorry, I was now color grading the black stripes, but this is my color grade. So let me disable it. So this was the original shot with the added rain. And then if you look at the shot from where I inspired this shot from, it's a lot more light. So I added here that lightness, basically. So lifting everything. In here, what I did was to add or change the color temperature of the shot, making it a bit cooler, a little bit bluer, but not so much the talent itself, because in the original shot, the skin tones are still quite skin tones, so they are not flash blue. Then in the third one, I did color cast the whole image with a little bit different kind of blue shade, and now it affects the skin tone, but it still preserves. Now we have a really blue background, but a really pretty skin tones. As pretty as they can be, since this is a small doll. And this is the final result with the color grading. And here is the final video. I would like to show you an overview of what I did in Resolve 15 for this sequence. If you remember from the film Riot 1, there are 4 shots. The grass, the talent's face, him walking back with his back in the camera, and then the drone shot. Here I have 4 similar shots, even though I changed the order of the last 2. But let's take a look at the shot that took most of the compositing work, And I will open it now in Fusion, and in Resolve 15, Fusion is integrated as part of the workflow. Now let me show you first the original media, and I'll resize the window a little bit so that you can see better. So here in the bottom, I have the 4 trackers that I used. Usually you would pipe them one after the other, and they would be part of the workflow, but in this composite shot, I will only connect the centers of some transforms and masks to the track position, so that's why I kept them separate. I tracked the eye of Marshall, which is sample in finish, then I tracked 3 times the main talent, twice in the head and 1 in the feet. And these tracking shots, or this tracked data, will be used to position the background and the masks, which are also then masking the background. And now let's take a look at the background. So first thing, I have a polygon on top of the talent, since it needs to show, so that's the part of the shot which will be shown all the time. And at some point I will have to do something so that these 2 statues in the foreground, they also show as well. And then for the ground, I have this desert wallpaper, but I wanted to blend it, so I used a color corrector and a blur node. So you can see now that the color corrector node, this is a lot more similar to the original shot. Then I have to blur it a bit because the shot is very, very sharp otherwise. And now you can see that the color grade or the color correction matches pretty well with the actual footage shot. So they will blend quite well. Next, then there's the sky. And for the sky, I got a Chicago wallpaper. And here, same things, but with different adjustments. So this is a very, very sharp picture. And at least in the film Riot shot, it's very, very blurry, if anything at all. And one thing is, of course, a color corrector. And here the blur. And the blur is a lot more drastic than with the ground. And here you can see both shots merged. So we have the original shot, which has the main talent, then the ground with the sun, and finally the Chicago skyline. And the centers of both background shots are then tied to the tracker, which are tracking the main talent. So then they move with the shot. But now I need the statues in the foreground. So how do we get those there? One thing is that this original shot, these statues or these fluffy toys from the Paw Patrol are very, very sharp, and there's quite a lot of color. And if you look at the film Riot one, they are very, not bland, but devoid of color maybe. So here I decrease a bit the saturation and then added blur. So this will help a little bit to sell the shot. And then we merge it with the shot that has the background. And here to merge it, of course, then I have to mask these statues. And this is a masking, and then I had been keyframing or actually rotoscoping this mask. I did way too much manual work. Here, with the second mask, I learned something. So what I did was draw the first mask and then track it using the eye of the dog. And I adjusted the mask points along the way. And here you can see with both statues. And finally I added some film grain to make it a little bit more rough, but it looks a lot better in the end. All right. And now let's go to the last clip. And in this clip, just to make it a little bit more interesting, I wanted to add a little bit of fog. And to add that fog, I used a fast noise. Not bright at all and very little contrast, so it's quite subtle. And I added the seed rate so it actually moves a little bit along the way. And then finally I added as well some film grain and pretty much the same settings that in the previous shot. And now the second clip, it's filmed almost exactly the same way than the previous one, so I have as well the same noise. And but now let's take a quick look at the color grade. So here, this first shot, I shot it in slow motion, and I forgot to change the color profile, so that's why the colors are popping so much more than the rest of the shots. So I have this first node where I'm basically desaturating it, so I'm hoping that then it's a bit easier to add the orange color. So here is the desaturation, And now this is the really heavy graded, so that I add a lot of color. So I changed a lot the offset towards the orange, and then a little bit the gain, which are the highlights, towards the yellow. Here we have the second shot, which is shot in Vlog with GH5, which allowed me to then grade it very much. Once again, the offset to the orange, and here I didn't have to do much more. So the gamma is a little bit towards the yellows, so that's the mid-tones, but that's about it. This shot, once again, very similar grading. If I remember correctly, I had to do some extra adjustments in here because there's a lot more color and textures to make it match with the rest of the shots. And for the last one, I basically grabbed the still from the second clip and just applied to this one. And the reason that this is a ProRes file is that this shot was shot in 10-bit, and I know that if I'm using Vlog with the GH5, I should shoot everything in 10-bit, but the other clips are in 8-bit. And Resolve 15, at least my free copy, does not really read well the 10-bit file from the GH5, so then I just transcode them to ProRes using FFmpeg and command line. And here's the final result. I hope you liked the videos, and if you have some suggestions of what I could be trying next, please let me know in the comments or somewhere else. And if you liked the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time. See ya!